Welcome back, Defenders. Jake here. This is an interesting story. He's a war criminal. An elite Putin security officer has defected to the West. But actually, this occurred 6 months ago, but we're only learning about it now. A Russian engineer named Gleb Karakulov boarded a flight from Kazakhstan to Turkey with his wife and daughter. He switched off his phone and said goodbye to his life in Russia as he tried to calm his fast-beating heart. But this was no ordinary Russian defector. Karakulov was an officer with Putin's secretive elite personal security service, one of the few Russians to flee and go public who have rank as well as knowledge of intimate details of Putin's life and potentially classified information. Karakulov, who was responsible for secure communications, said moral opposition to Russia's invasion of Ukraine and his fear of dying there drove him to speak out. Despite the risks to himself and his family, he said he hoped to inspire other Russians to speak out also. Our president has become a war criminal. It is time to end this war and stop being silent. So what exactly did this guy do? As an engineer in a field unit of the Presidential Communications Department of the Federal Protective Service, this is the FSO, Karakulov was responsible for setting up secure communications for the Russian president and the prime minister wherever they went. While he was not a confidant of Putin's, Karakulov spent years in his service observing him from unusually close quarters from 2009 to when he left in 2022. Karakulov, his wife, and his child have gone underground, and it was impossible to speak to them directly due to security constraints. So this story of his escape is kind of wild. I'll link this clip to CNN in a pinned comment down below if you want to check it out. But basically, Putin went to Kazakhstan last October. This guy did his job setting up the secure communication lines for Putin and the Kremlin. He then just kind of pretended he was sick in his hotel room, and he had his wife and daughter meet him at the airport in Kazakhstan, and all three of them together snuck on a flight to go to Istanbul. It was at that point that he defected to the West, and for security reasons, he wants to not reveal where he is now. He could be in the UK, Canada, the United States. I'm sure he is paranoid that the FSB is coming for him. But after 6 months of basically being in hiding, he wanted to get his story out. So he spoke with a reporter from the Dossier Center, and this reporter is going on other programs such as CNN. But this guy was listening to Putin's phone calls for 13 years before defecting to the West. So I'm sure he had some interesting stories to tell. Partly for this reason, Russia is now confiscating passports of all their senior officials to stop defections. I'm sure they're also confiscating the passports of spouses and children, once again to prevent these kinds of defections. Kremlin tightens Soviet-era travel restrictions in sensitive areas. These are rats fleeing a sinking ship. Trust me, you don't want to be stuck in Russia without a passport when the Civil War breaks out. In other diplomatic news, the United States has sent a new ambassador to Russia, and Putin used this as an opportunity to publicly scold her and blame the United States for everything. So what this clip is a credential presentation ceremony for various new ambassadors to Russia, but Putin wanted to single this woman out. This is Lynn Tracy in the blue jacket, and I'll read for you what Putin says. Relations between Russia and the United States, which directly determine global security and stability, are unfortunately in a deep crisis. It is based on fundamentally different approaches to the formation of the modern world order, "Dear Miss Ambassador, I don't want to break the nice atmosphere of presenting credentials, and I know you may not agree with my view, but I cannot help saying today that the use by the United States of such tools in its foreign policy as supporting the so-called color revolutions and supporting the coup in 2014 has ultimately led to the current Ukrainian crisis and further contributed negatively to the deterioration of Russian-American relations." So Putin's official position is that Ukraine does not have the right to self-determination. It's a fake country. Russia and the Kremlin gets to rule the government in Kyiv in perpetuity forever. If the people of Ukraine have a revolution and want to have true democracy, well, that's not allowed. That violates Russia's rule of we get to control Ukraine forever. This woman doesn't care. She knows that Putin is a mass murderer, and more than likely a year from now, he will no longer be the president of Russia. And let me read for you this next part. I always think this is interesting. When the credential presentation ceremony ended, he says, "Unfortunately, this is the end of the ceremony. Because of the sanitary restriction still being in effect, we will not be able to speak with you in person, but in the course of your work, I'm sure you will have the opportunity to do so on several occasions." So Putin does not let anyone in his own government get within 30 meters of him. So of course he's not going to shake the hands and get close to and talk to these new ambassadors to Russia. So whenever Putin walks into this room, he always comes from his security bunker in the back. As soon as he's done talking at the podium, he immediately retreats back into his bunker. He won't even shake the hands of these new ambassadors to Russia. So my question to you is that if sanitary restrictions are preventing him from getting close to ambassadors to Russia, who the heck is this guy? This is the Kremlin's official website, and this event was in January, talking about meeting with university students to mark Russian Students' Day. Who the heck is this guy wearing platform shoes, trying to look taller than these women, meeting with all of these students if there are currently sanitary restrictions in place? Makes you wonder. Let's now follow up on the story of this Russian military blogger who got blown up by this statue. And as more information comes out, I'm more convinced that the FSB wanted to kill this guy. Do you really think the Ukrainians, if they were behind this, would waste their time constructing this statue and then placing explosives inside of it? This is supposed to be a statue of this guy's face. That's kind of weird. But Prigozhin is not having it. So this restaurant in which the explosion took place is owned by Prigozhin of the Wagner Group. This guy is wearing a Wagner Mercenary Group t-shirt. And Prigozhin is not playing along with the FSB's official story that Ukraine was behind this bombing. Prigozhin publicly excluded Ukraine as being behind the bombing in his restaurant and made clear that this was a domestic Russian operation targeting him. So here's Prigozhin sitting in the exact spot where the bomb went off in his restaurant, making this statement that he doesn't believe the FSB story that Ukraine did this. And here's an interesting thread with just bizarre details of this entire incident. I already told you in my last video that the woman behind the bombing didn't get away from the bomb. She sat down right next to it. Additionally, after the bomb went off, she stood outside the restaurant with all the other survivors, not trying to flee the scene, confused about what was happening. So we're now learning that security cameras along the route taken by the suspect in the killing of this blogger were reportedly not working on the day of the bombing, creating a dead zone where she could have met someone. This has raised further suspicions over who was responsible. So it's amazing how Russia is a, security state with surveillance everywhere, but every time there's a bombing, all the security cameras seem to be turned off. The same thing happens last August with the bombing that killed Daria Dugina. The cameras watching the parking lot when the bomb was placed on the car, those cameras that day had somehow been switched off. It's really only the FSB, if they were planning such an operation, that could accomplish this where all the cameras are turned off. So if we just think about who really benefits by killing this military blogger, and it doesn't benefit Prigozhin, this guy was a cheerleader for the Wagner Group. So if there is a concerted effort from the regular Russian military and the Kremlin to weaken this guy, then knocking out his number one cheerleader with 500,000 subscribers on Telegram might be an effective way to weaken Prigozhin. Additionally, if you turn this guy into a martyr and even 5% of his subscribers decide to volunteer and sign up for the Russian military to avenge their guy, that's 25,000 men potentially signing up for the Russian military. So I think the FSB decided to roll the dice and knock off this minor player and see if they can get any benefit from doing so. So these are the guys. These are the Z warriors who probably followed Vladlin's channel. What are they up to? So this totally looks like a completely organic grassroots protest outside of the American embassy in Moscow in response to Finland joining NATO. They're not protesting outside the Finnish embassy, they're protesting outside the US embassy. I don't think we had anything to do with Finland joining NATO. They wanted to join NATO and their government voted to do so. And this is the hard reality for Russia. This is the country of Finland up here, and Russia's border with NATO just more than doubled due to Finland joining. Sweden is going to join in the coming weeks probably, and by the time this war in Ukraine is over, I predict that Moldova and Ukraine will be joining NATO as well. So here's the moment on Kremlin State TV where Skabayeva decides to announce to the people of Russia that, yeah, Finland joined NATO.
Тоже важно. Руководство Финляндии поднимет флаг страны в штаб-квартире НАТО. Ожидается, что это произойдет во время встречи глав МИД Альянса в Брюсселе, в Хельсинки. Информацию уже подтвердили. После официального вступления Финляндии в НАТО протяженность сухопутной границы России с Альянсом вырастет, внимание, в 2 с лишним раза. К нынешним 1215 километрам добавится еще 1272.
This woman has a voice as pleasant to listen to as a garbage disposal. But this is a huge strategic defeat, and if Russians really believe that NATO is a direct threat to Russia, then these guys should all be joining the military. Rather than doing this fake protest outside the US Embassy, it's been 13, 14 months. Why are these guys not joining the military to go to Ukraine and fight NATO? Yeah. Here's the joke online, though. This is St. Petersburg. We're now going to call this the Gulf of Cope, and we've got Estonia on the left, Finland on the right. The Baltic Sea is now called Lake NATO, and Russia shall not pass. If you're not familiar with the geography, this is where St. Petersburg is located, and St. Petersburg is now within GLSDB range of both Estonia and Finland. So what the heck has China been up to? And China's EU ambassador has thrown Russia under the bus. Beijing didn't support Russia's decision to invade Ukraine. Interesting, but if we go back in time and look at articles from February 4th of last year, we have titles such as this: Russia-China push back against US in pre-Olympics summit. So last year, Beijing hosted the Olympics, and Putin himself went in person to talk to President Xi, more than likely to notify him of what he was planning. This was 3 weeks prior to the full-scale invasion, and I'm 100% confident that Putin told China what he was going to do. Now, did President Xi tell Russia, don't do that? No, I don't think China tried to stop Russia. But I also don't think China ever signaled that they were willing to help the Russians. This is not a real military alliance. But publicly, to the media, Russia and China said that they had a no-limit friendship. Here we are, 14 months later, China's ambassador to the EU is now saying that no-limit friendship comments with Moscow was nothing but rhetoric. We're not really Russia's military ally. So things are getting interesting with China as they slowly are starting to change their language and even change some policies about naming cities with Chinese names in outer Manchuria. So here's a map of the Qing Empire in 1820. This was prior to China's century of humiliation in which European powers carved up China. Portugal, Great Britain, France, Germany, Russia, and Japan. They all had their spheres of influence controlling various parts of China. And by 1950 or 1953, China had back all of their territory, except for what the Russians took. China never got back outer Manchuria. So what is Beijing's true purpose? What is their long game here? And here's another article titled, France's Macron visits China seeking a breakthrough in the Ukraine war. China is the wild card. If they wanted to go all in on supporting Russia, sending them equipment and weapons, it might make a difference and help the Russians win in Ukraine. Likewise, China could go the opposite direction and fully participate in Western sanctions and pretty much collapse Russia this month. But China's going to do nothing. China's only going to do what is in their own best interest. And if Russia de-evolves into civil war and collapses on their own within the next year or two, oh no, the Chinese military might have to go into outer Manchuria in order to restore peace and stability, protect those ethnic Chinese people suffering due to the collapsing government in Moscow. It's going to happen. Good news for Ukraine, as President Biden announced the next security assistance package for Ukraine, this time worth $2.6 billion, and there's a lot of good stuff in this package. Worth highlighting is 10 trucks and 10 trailers to transport heavy equipment, as well as some armored bridging systems. So it sounds like the last 3 or 4 months the United States has been sending specific equipment and supplies to help Ukraine launch a spring counteroffensive. And when we look at U.S. military aid month by month, this is a pretty interesting chart. March was pretty light, only $750 million. But that might be because January and February, the announcements were huge. $5.9 billion, 4.6. So when something is announced, it still takes time to get it on a plane or a ship and have it delivered to Ukraine. But look at this chart. The last time the United States surged in a lot of equipment, August and September. This was just before the Kharkiv counteroffensive, in which Ukraine liberated, over 1,000 square kilometers worth of territory. This was in September, and then later in November, Ukraine liberated everything on the North Bank in the Kherson region. So potentially, is there another push coming from the Ukrainian military? Given that we've seen this surge in military assistance from Western countries. And Reznikov looks pretty confident. He put out a statement this week saying that the war will end soon. He believes it could end this year. So let's start the clock and hope that, Ukraine can get this victory by December. And how will this war end? I argue it'll end abruptly, but it has to end with Putin being taken out or Putin being taken into custody. Zelensky has already said he's not going to sit down and negotiate with Putin. The Kremlin is going to have a coup, replace Putin, and then Zelensky will formally enter peace talks with whoever replaces him, but only after Ukraine retakes all of their sovereign territory, including Crimea, including the Donbas region. President Zelensky also made his third trip abroad since the war began, this time visiting with the president in Poland. And this is what Zelensky had to say in Warsaw. After the United States and the United Kingdom, Poland is the country that has sent the most military aid to Ukraine, including 300 tanks. And per capita, hands down, Poland is the winner. Poland has provided more military aid, given the size of their economy, more than the UK or the United States. Poland has been incredible. And if you're not familiar with the geography, here's a map of Europe from the 1800s, and large sections of Ukraine used to belong to the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth. Ukrainians and Poles share a common history. Geographically, they're neighbors. And Russia is always trying to stoke this fear and paranoia and conspiracy theories that Poland is about to attack Ukraine. So here is Narshkin, director of the Foreign Intelligence Service of Russia, promoting this conspiracy that the Polish military is about to invade Ukraine.
Получение контроля над западными территориями современной Украины, над так называемыми бывшими восточными крессами Польши, является такой вожделенной мечтой.
If this guy actually believes what he's saying, he's an idiot. I'm glad he's in charge of Russia's Foreign Intelligence Service because they're incompetent. But more than likely, he knows this is not true, but he's just putting out that propaganda to encourage conspiracy theories. But here's the truth. Here's a tweet from President Zelensky, and this is what he has to say about Poland. In the future, there will be no borders between our peoples, political, economic, and, what is very important, historical. But for that, we will need to gain victory. For that, we will need to walk side by side a little more. If Ukraine joins the EU and joins NATO, then economically and militarily, they're kind of the same country. Yes, there will be a geographic border, they elect different presidents, but these people, with their shared history, can be one again within the EU and within NATO, safe and secure from Russia. Poland also announced that they have transferred a total of 8 of their MiG-29 fighter jets to Ukraine. Total, they're going to send 14. This is on top of Slovakia sending 13 of their jets, so this is 27 MiG-29s, planes Ukrainians already know how to maintain and fly. So fantastic news from Poland and Slovakia. Last couple pieces of good news, and the first one concerns Roman. He's a Ukrainian defender who's been fighting on the front lines close to the city of Bakhmut. I've shared several of his videos here on the channel. And yesterday on Twitter, his sister Lilia posted this picture stating that Roman was safe, currently in the city of Kramatorsk. So either his unit was rotated out or Roman is currently taking personal time. Either way, he's safe, and I just want to let everyone know that. Final video I have for you is another birthday celebration on the front lines. I wish this Ukrainian defender a happy birthday, and I hope he has many more birthdays and years to come. That's all for this update video. Glory to Ukraine, glory to the heroes. If you found this video informative, give me a thumbs up. Best way to support the channel. Comments and questions, let me know down below. I love hearing from you guys. Till the next video, keep defending the truth, keep defending democracy.